Tonight we're looking at the question of riding a bike on Shabbos as per Yossi's request. So I very much enjoyed researching the topic. I had read a responsa. I mentioned that I read a responsa from Rabbi Yosef, but I was mistaken. It's from his son Yitzchak Yosef, and I found it again, and he was very helpful in helping me find sources, as is the case with the father Rabbi Yosef and the son Yitzchak. They are very, what's the word? Generous. Is that the right word? With their sources. Whereas Rabbi Feinstein might quote 2-3 sources and make a strong argument, Rabbi Yosef will list 50 sources and tell you 20 here, 30 here, the laws with the 30. So before computers were around, he was Google engine search for all responses everywhere. So whenever you're doing research, Rabbi Yosef is always a great place to start. Whether you agree with what he concludes it don't, he's going to have all the sources there. So in this case, I was reliant a lot on Rabbi Yitzchak Yosef, the son of Rabbi Yosef, in a book called Yalkut Yosef. So we're going to come to his conclusions at the end, but I used a lot of his sources to put this. There's one response which we'll learn soon from Rabbi Yosef, from Rabbi Yitzchak Yosef's father, that wasn't in that section there, but I found it through something else, and here are the findings. So to start with, just give us historical context of what era we're talking about, because bikes, of course, didn't exist forever, and they only became a question when they come on the scene. So as I wrote in my note, we're going to divide this into kind of two. First is the reaction of the rabbinic authority of the day. As soon as it comes out and it starts becoming popular, people start turning to their rabbis and saying, what's the law? And I imagine local rabbis may feel that it's too big of a question to put on their shoulders, and they'll send off a letter to the greater leading authorities of the day, and they'll respond with their view. That's the Shaalos U'Teshuvos, right? The response that we're always looking at. So first we're going to look at that generation, and we're going to have most forbidding. I don't have a list of all of them here because it'll take too long, but just samplings of the various different reasons as to why they say it's forbidden to ride a bike on Shabbos. And we have one lone voice permissible. So that's one generation. And then we're going to look at our generation and see how they look at the previous generation's conclusions, or how they look at the previous generation's writings and draw their conclusions. And when we look at the way they do that, we're going to really understand how the halachic process works. And I think it's going to put in perspective a lot of the things we talked about before, just understanding the process of how Rabbanim think when they come to a conclusion.
Just one question before you. The Chazon Ish was in the beginning of the 1900s, right?
Chazon Ish is
early 1900s. When was it?
Not that long ago.
It's like 1920s.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah, beginning of 1900s. Yeah.
With everything, all this, is there a difference if the bike has lights on it and muktzah, or that's irrelevant to the whole deal?
Might be a little bit relevant. Might be a little relevant, as we'll see. But
muktzah also.
It might be a little relevant. But the first generation that responded to the issue of bikes, they were not talking about electricity. We were talking straight bikes. So we're actually going to see some of the people how they describe bikes. It's kind of funny to hear that too. But let's see. So first, sorry. Well, let's see. So first is I have just a Wikipedia text, which is bicycles were introduced in the 19th century in Europe. That's the main point.
Right.
And by the early 20th century, there's tons of bikes. We got that. The point is it comes at the beginning of the 19th century. I was trying to figure out why they write the word introduced, but then you keep on reading and you discover that it's not exactly clear who invented it. And there's one person who had one version earlier and another version came later. But the point is, at the beginning of the 19th century, so we're talking about in the early 1800s, is when it comes on the scene, and it becomes much more popular towards the end of the 1800s. And I'm guessing that based on that's the first people in the halachic world to respond to it, because they wouldn't respond to it the second it's invented. They would respond to it when it starts becoming more popular and the community starts asking, right? So I'm guessing just based on when these halachic responses are published, that it must have become popular in the late 1800s. So considering that, I put the dates of all the authors that we quote. So the first thing we're going to do is look at the lone voice that's permissible, that permits the riding of bikes on Shabbos. And this is the famous Rabbi Yosef Chaim of Baghdad. And you can see his picture there. He has a beautiful face. So I figured I'd put his picture and just really has a very, the pasuk says, Chachmas Adam Torah Panav, the wisdom of man shines through on his face. He's a very elegant face, Where is he from? Baghdad. Iraq. Yeah. And he is known as the famous Ben Ishchai. The famous Ben Ishchai, by Yosef Chaim of Baghdad. And he wrote a book of responsa called Rav Poyalim. So this is a Rav Poyalim, as you can see on the top there, Chelik Aleph, Volume 1, Section Eira Chaim, which would be dealing with the laws of life cycle and year cycle, including Shabbos. Siman, not the life cycle, I'm saying the year cycle, the calendar cycle. Siman Chafei, Section 25. So here you see he lives in the years 1835 to 1909. So I'm going to guess he's writing this responsa not when he's 10 in 1845, and not maybe when he's 20, would be young already. So it's got to be the late 1800s when he's writing this responsa. So he writes, Nishalti, I was asked, Me'es HaYakar for Hamaskal, from the precious wise one. I'm not sure what the Samach Yud stands for. Meir Tzalach, that's the person's name. He's asking him the question. Nun Reish Vav is a common word, or common little like initials, these three letters here. Nun Reish Vav are commonly used after someone's name. Sometimes you'll have Shichya, which means may this person live. Sometimes Nun Yud, which means Neda Yoir, let his light shine. Here, as you can see, I write it out. Natre Rachmana V'Achye. The merciful one should look at him and give him life. Okay. And this question comes from Bombay, from Bombay, India. That's where this person, Meir Tzalach, lives.
Natre means what? Look?
I think it means like turn towards Aramaic, like Nati. I think. I know. Yeah, I think I'm not 100% sure. I think that's what it means. So this person lived in Bombay. So from Bombay, he's sending a question to Baghdad. That's why I said it's probably like one of the discussions that came up in the local communities, and no one felt that they had strong enough weight to say definitively yes, no. So they decided to send it off to those who are more famous, the Ben Ishchai in Baghdad. So he writes that Nimtza Korain, there is some sort of, Korain is like not a wagon, but a kind of like a transportation device. Shakarin, I'm guessing the way to pronounce this word is Jari. I'm assuming in some language, maybe an Indian or an old Indian, Jari is a bike. Anyway, so this Jari, Shekavua by Shnei Galgalim, it has two wheels. It's not drawn by animals, and not people. Elo Mahalech Me'elav, it goes on its own, by the force of the person who sits on it. He pushes the wheels with his feet. This is not necessary.
It is two,
No, meaning not that. He means not that people carry him, because the Gemara talks about boxes that are carried by other people. He means not carried by other people. It's not being pulled by other people or by animals. This is the kinds of transportation devices we're used to. This is a new phenomenon where it's pushed by the guy sitting on it, and with his own feet he pushes the wheels. And he wanted to know if it's permissible to ride on this jari, or gari. I'm guessing just because he's from Arab land, it's with a j, not a g. Yeah, if Shabbos b'yomtiv or lav, is it permissible to ride this on Shabbos and yomtiv or not? Yoreinu hamoira, let the instructor instruct us. V'scharei kafel min hashamayim, may his reward be doubled from heaven. Okay, so here's the response. So you can see I wrote ... there because the response is much longer. He gets on the whole discussion of carrying on Shabbos, because the Gemara discusses a case about a chair that moves out, and can you compare this to the chair, not compare this to the chair? Is it forbidden? Is it not? A whole long discussion. His conclusion, though, the following seems to me: it's permissible to ride on this jari mentioned in the question. It moves by the force of the person who himself is sitting on this device. Whether it's Shabbos or Yomtiv. Within the city limits that has an Eruv.
It has to have an Eruv.
Yes. Because he gets into a whole discussion about whether it's considered carrying on Shabbos or not. And he concludes that it's probably considered carrying. But if there's an Eruv, why is it considered carrying?
A carriage, you're not carrying, but if the Eruv, you can use it.
I didn't get to the whole topic I didn't go through the whole thing as to why he considers it carrying, but it goes through a whole back and forth as to why it's called carrying. He compares it to a case of the Gemara talks about a chair that a person sits on and it moves out. He says it's considered carrying. But if it's not, he actually he says that if there's no Eruv, you might even be allowed to go for Dvar Mitzvah, right? We're going to see soon, maybe that he also says also. Anyway, the point is, he says like this, and the key is coming up soon. So if the city has an Eruv, it's permissible. The lake of Azeh, Zilzul Mishum Uvd Nechel. There's no like Zilzul means there's no like this should be considered making light of Shabbos. Calling this as Uvdin D'Choil. Uvdin D'Choil means
is a separate thing.
that's right. No, one second.
One thing.
Only if there's an Eruv is this is just a question. If there's no Eruv, it's definitely not allowed.
Right.
Assuming there's an Eruv, so it's all considered. There's no issue of carrying. It's a question of whether or not the actual mechanism is permissible or not. So one might say it's considered. Sorry.
How does the Eruv have to do anything?
Because otherwise he's carrying the bike.
That's the whole thing.
But we don't see how we.
No, now we're saying let's
In other words,
assuming there's an Eruv in town.
Right. The whole
Is it
thing-
permissible?
Right. So the whole thing is about the carrying. If the Eruv is there, it's not carrying. If the Eruv isn't there, it's carrying. That's the entire argument.
We're not done yet.
Right, that's not everyone.
We're not done yet. We're on
I got
page
the
one.
answer to it.
But right now we're saying that if there's an Eruv, you're allowed to drive the bike out. This is Rabbi.
I get it.
This is the Ben Ish Chai's view. Rabbi Yosef
And
Chaim.
the Leica,
And he's saying this
if
is not-
an Eruv-
Driving the bike is not considered making light of Shabbos and acting in a manner that's similar to the weekday. That's what Uvdin D'Choil means. Uvdin D'Choil means doing things that aren't necessarily technically forbidden, but they have a sort of weekday, mundane sort of sense to them. And driving a bike doesn't constitute that. It's a perfectly fine thing.
That's why he
Yeah.
says,
Even shu b'soicha ir shish be'eruv, because you're in a city that has an Eruv, an enclosure. The chola ir neshrav kirshus hayachid. The entire city is like a private domain. We can definitely rely on those who allow for Eruvs in these cities.
So he is.
He's saying it's okay.
Of the Nechel to Davka where there's an Eruv.
No, he's saying it's not Uvdin D'Choil. You're going to see he's going to be completely permissive. We'll see soon.
You're
He's
going
gonna
to
be
say not because
He's saying
In the-
don't think that this is considered Uvdin D'Choil.
Right.
Davka where.
Because if it's an issue of Uvdin D'Choil, you can't do it in your own house either. Makes a difference. If there's a question, if there's a question, if something, one second, and therefore it's no zilzal,
Right.
therefore it's permissible. If one second, then let's do. I don't think they have to do with each other. Well, let's keep on reading. You'll see. I don't think it has anything to do with each other. The point is, if this was something that counted as Uvdin D'Choil, counted as a mundane act, it would be forbidden even in your own house. Nothing to do. But because there's a native here, it's all perfectly fine, and don't worry about Uvdin D'Choil. It's no problem. This is his view. You're going to see he's very permissive. We're going to see in a minute. And we'll see really the crux of his argument in a moment. So on page 2, I'll tell you something new in this regard.
He's saying
Ben Ish Chai. Yeah. 1 second. It's not on the bottom of.
It's on the bottom of the first.
Oh, okay. So for me, it's on page 2 here. So I'll tell you something new in this regard. No, 1 second. Yeah, everybody will agree that this is permissible in a place that has an Eruv. Because the person who's sitting on this bike is only pushing his feet. And the bike is moving on its own. And and this is different than the case he mentions earlier in his responsa, which I mentioned before. He talks about this chair that you carry out, and he goes through a whole discussion whether it's considered carrying or not. And he's saying, whatever your opinion about that is, this bike is for sure not like that, because those is being carried by people, whereas this is moving on its own. It's my feet that's pushing it. Likewise, this is very different than a stick that one grabs in his hand. But he keeps on raising it up and down as he's walking with the walking stick. Let's say the person doesn't need it. But this person, the bike is moving on its own with the movements of his leg, and the movements of his leg is not a direct movement of carrying, it's an indirect movement of carrying. So like it even lessens the degree, even if you're going to think it's carrying, it's really nothing. And therefore he says, therefore it seems to me, we can readily, shufi means like, openly and broadly and easily permit it. Whether it's Shabbos, Yomtiv, and a city that has a Eruv, even if he's just going for a stroll on his bike. How much more so if he's going to do a mitzvah. Furthermore, there's another good reason in this case to be permissive. That if I'll make an argument as to why riding a bike does not constitute mundane activity. Why? Because on this bike, this jari, mentioned above in the question, for the most part, it is not meant to be ridden. Only one person, alone. Bikes are meant for one person. Therefore, someone who sees someone else driving on a bike, it's not going to seem as if this person is going some long distance. A person might think, I'm looking at someone sitting on a bike, and it looks like a mundane activity because look, he must be traveling somewhere far. Because the bike to begin with is built only for one person, it's probably not a far drive he's going on. Long distances are not traveled alone. Certainly not in those days.
Get knocked out with today's day.
Yeah, today's day
people do go long distances. They go 20 kilometers, 30, 40 kilometers.
That's number one. Number one, today people do long distances on bikes, but also depends on how you would see the guy dressed. If the guy's dressed up in his whole bike gear with the pants and the things and then maybe you would think he's driving up north. I know, I'm just making the point. But back then it seemed like, you ever seen like the pictures of the people in the 1940s and 50s and 30s, 20s with their suits on, they're on their bike. The guy's going from his house to his office. He's going from his house to shul. No one thinks he's going on a whole long journey. So he's saying, someone looking at this doesn't think he's doing some mundane activity. Whatever, he's going to his neighbors for lunch. I mean, like, that's kind of what Rabbi Yosef Chaim is saying.
But to me, it just looks like a weekday thing. It's nothing.
But let's guys, we're gonna get there. We're gonna get there. We're gonna get there. We're gonna get there.
If you were to light candles 8 at a time and then one less and one less, you'd say it's stupid to write one at a time.
Let's do it. Let's go one at a time. One at a time. So again, we'll start. Let's one at a time. One at a time.
He's giving you a good argument.
So then he says like this. This is really actually, I think the next paragraph is the main part of his argument. To me, it seems that the next part of his argument is the main part, which is the no, he says, we have no right to impose a decree in this matter. To say that, okay, we're making a decree, no one should drive bikes on Shabbos. It's not our place to do that, says the Ben Ish Chai. Because Shema, and why would you impose this decree? Because people might think they're allowed to drive on a wagon, an ordinary wagon, as a result of you being permissive of the bike. Which these wagons are drawn by people, or by other people that carry them. So, first of all, the reason why you should not say, bikes should be forbidden to drive on Shabbos, because people might confuse it with a regular wagon that people or animals carry. Number one, no one's making such a mistake. There's because people see visibly that bikes are distinct from wagons. So that's number one. But additionally, here I think is the key of his argument. We do not have the right to impose new decrees on our own. We don't have that authority. This is Rabbi Yosef, the Ben Ish Chai, writing in between 1835 and 1909. So I'm imagining the late 1800s, let's say. We don't have the right to start imposing new decrees. And it would be enough for people of this generation to uphold the decrees that are explicitly stated in the words of our sages. So what are we going to do? Start imposing new decrees? There are enough decrees we have to deal with. If only we were to inspire our generation to follow what our sages tell us. Now we're going to go find new ones. Therefore, we can readily make it available and permissive on Shabbos and Yom Tov, in a city that has an Erev, even if he's going to just to stroll on his bike for leisure and not because of any mitzvah. So what's the main point of the Ben Ish Chai's argument? It would seem to me like this, and this is, sorry?
It has to be where there's an Erev.
One second, I want to say the main point of his argument. This is what it seems to me, I think. As we're going to see, sorry?
He's doing it himself. The bike, he's not, the person himself is pedaling and
the main argument of things like this. As we're going to see from those who are forbidding, none of them are going to have a very solid argument to forbid bikes. None of them are going to have that. They're putting a dart and then putting the circles around it. And not doing that by mistake, doing it on purpose.
Rambam does that.
We're going to, one second. We're going to see, it's very often that's the case. And I'll tell you what, you'll see this especially when you read Shuvas, and we're going to see it soon. One of the people who forbid is going to say, he's going to quote the Chassam Sofer, who famously says, Chadash Asur min HaTorah. New things are forbidden. This is the Chassam Sofer's argument against it. Chassam Sofer, a leading Hungarian Rav, who is fighting back against like the Maskilim, the Enlightenment, and even to a degree fighting back against the modern orthodoxy that was emerging from Germany at the time. And the Chassam Sofer coined this phrase, Chadash Asur min HaTorah. trying to introduce new ideas in Judaism, forbidden. It's a play on words. I'll explain when we get there what this means. And it would seem to me that from that perspective, a lot of the Rabbanim came and said, we know Shabbos is experienced in such and such a manner. The prolific usage of bikes will change the dynamics of Shabbos experience. And thus we're going to make it forbidden. And around that, we're going to find all these reasons, and it's going to be a conglomerate of reasons. That's what it seems to me, because a lot of them don't say like, oh, this is the reason why it's forbidden. A lot of them say this. And if that's not an issue, this is an issue. If that's not an issue, this is an issue. And we're going to see 3, 4, 5 issues they're going to raise. But I think it all stems from an inherent sense that bikes would ruin Shabbos as we know it, and therefore forbidden. But here are the reasons. And that's the main argument that I think the Ben Ish Chai is pushing back against and saying, we don't get to do that. Shabbos was defined by the sages. Unless you can give me some real reason why this is a violation of some precept, I'm not going to go and invent new prohibitions. That seems to me to be the real argument of the Ben Ish Chai. That's what I think is going on here. That's why I put that last paragraph. You should know we don't have the right to put things. And if only people followed everything of Shabbos, we're going to start adding new things. That's what it seems to me is really at their heart of the Ben Ish Chai's argument. That's how I think. And you're going to see when we see the other ones why I say this. Yeah, what do you think? What do you say?
Yeah, but I find it fascinating that he feels that he should be the one, or we should, whoever the decree comes from. But clearly, decrees are being that there's decisions being made all the time.
So there's a difference between taking old principles and applying it now versus saying, okay, there's no principle about this, but we're going to make a principle about it. We can't find a principle in Torah that applies to this case, but we're going to make one now. It's very different than saying, okay, these are the principles in Torah and they apply to this case because of X reason. Say in the case of a heart transplant, nobody made a new decree there. They just went back to the old sources to see what's the definition of death, what's the moment of death, and so on and so forth, right? So they didn't make any new decrees forbidding heart transplants. They took pre-existing decrees and applied them to now.
You have to do that all the time.
But that's not a problem because you're not making a new decree. You're taking old, well-established principles and applying them to new scenarios. In this case, okay, so
you go pointed to.
But he's saying that there are no real principles that would forbid this activity, and you're just trying to create new ones, and that we can't do.
What's the principle of this?
Actually, electricity is a similar example. When electricity came out, and maybe we'll do this. Maybe we'll do a similar exercise with electricity. And the same thing happened. Is electricity forbidden or permissible on Shabbos? There was a minority opinion that says permissible, and the majority came and said it's forbidden. And they each every person had different reasons why it's forbidden. One because of boina, makabah patesh, mesakin kli, have different explanations. What stands at the root of them all? They all understood. If we introduce electricity to Shabbos experience, then Shabbos, as it's been observed for the last 2,500 years, will not be the same. And we understand with the intuition of Torah that this is not the right way to keep Shabbos. That's what a lot of this comes down to. The intuition of Torah. And the intuition of Torah is not something to be taken lightly. First of all, it only happens after years of study and committing to memory lots of Torah. That's number one. Number two, it only comes after a community relies on this person's halachic rulings, and the larger the community, so the whole Jewish people, relying on this person's halachic rulings, the deeper is intuition in Torah. And this intuition, I would argue, is a divine thing. We must believe that if we believe that we're still following Torah as is given at Sinai, right, then we must believe that Hashem is continuously, actively engaged in the halachic process. And as the rabbis mull out and argue out what the right thing is, and then they come to a conclusion, as we're going to see here, there's one opinion against bike and the majority against. And then the modern generation is going to basically come and say, well, we looked at the previous generation, maybe we would agree with all their arguments, but they all said it's forbidden, so we're going to say it's forbidden too. Because that's the process of how Torah operates. And if we believe that Hashem is active in this process, then we have to believe that as the sages come to the conclusions based on their Torah intuition and their studies and all the rest of it, then this is what Hashem wants. And that's the principle of Acharei Rab Mahatos, follow the majority. That's the principle here, right? And that's what I think is really playing out in this discussion on the bike. And Rabbi, the Ben Ish Chai happens to be on the side which says, leave it alone. You know, if only we can inspire everybody to keep Shabbos as we know it, never mind new things. This is his argument.
That's another thing.
But I think that's at the core of it.
Because don't add more things.
I think
is it really?
I think it's the core of it.
Yes, and
I think
to
it's
burden people with more problems.
that's right. And therefore, b'shufi, let everybody enjoy their bikes. And if this is going to make people keep Shabbos nicer, go for it. This is how
How are you going to keep with it?
I don't know. They're about to go to the neighbor's house. They won't be so
Imagine
so
the
constricted.
phone
They
was
can go to
written
shul.
out. Everyone will be on their phone Shabbos.
Yeah, exactly.
That's
So,
nice.
the,
No
so
rest, that's
yeah,
it.
so
No
hundreds of
way
years ago,
Shabbos.
when electricity came out and all they had was an oven in the kitchen, what's the big deal for making cooking easier on Shabbos for oven in the kitchen? Their intuition saved us from having phones and shul on Shabbos. You understand? The Chachamim have a certain divine intuition that allows us to observe Torah as Hashem wants it.
I'm laughing at you should. He's telling you.
That's how it came about.
That's what's happening.
They didn't know there was going to be iPhones one day when electricity first came out.
It's not Shabbos. That's
It
something.
doesn't feel right to you, but that doesn't mean that if they came up with the opposite decree, then you'd say it was.
But they
okay.
wouldn't.
No, you can't.
They wouldn't
It doesn't fit with
because
Shabbos.
they had that deep intuition of what Torah is and what Shabbos is. Okay, so before we get to those who forbid, let's just learn a little bit more about this permissibility. We're going to find just an interesting little rabbinic banter, which I thought was fun when I found it, so I'm sharing it.
It's nothing. It's not a weekday.
We're going to get there. We'll get there. So before we get to those who forbid, let's see further about the permissibility. The next text comes from a work called the Yaskal Avdi. And you can see there it's from Rabbi Hadaya, I think it's pronounced it, 1889 to 1969, from Syria originally, and then moved to Israel. He's one of those who forbid the usage of bikes. And then he writes, I'm not sure if you can read it clearly. I'm rather curious at, I think that's what he says, that which is maybe from that which you say, it's hard to read the words. From Rabbi Yosef Chaim, he's referring to the Ben Ish Chaim. He wasn't concerned with the issues I raised. He raised the issues of Uvdin Dechol, that Shabbos is that biking is a weekday activity. And clear, it must be, says Rabbi Hadayar, the Yaskal Avdi, it must be that Vadai Hagomor, absolute certainty. The Harav Zal, that the Rabbi, blessed memory, referring to the Ben Ish Chai, the previous text, Loi Hayabaki Betiv Taluche Habicyclet Hazeh. He certainly didn't know how bikes work. There's no way he would have said it's permissible. This is what the Yaskal Avdi is saying. If you were to know that the bike is easily to break down, and therefore the person is going to be compelled to fix it on Shabbos or carry it on Shabbos, which is one of the reasons to forbid it, as we're going to see soon. So if the Ben Ish Chai would know what bikes were like and how easily they break, he would certainly not permit it. Now here's an interesting line. I think, says the Yaskal Avdi, Shemaiti, that I once heard mipim magidei emes, from truthful and upright people. I'm not sure what this thing is. The next.
His name again.
No. That was Yosef Chaim. This is Ches before the Yud. I think it means from the city in Bavel, Rabasi, from the big city in Bavel, in Babylonia, meaning Iraq, meaning Baghdad. So I heard from elder people in Baghdad. I don't remember which of the holy people were the ones that told me what I'm about to share to you. Shahayu Oimrim, that the people of Baghdad would say, that after he wrote the response that we just read, permitting bikes on Shabbos, and later and he learned well how bikes operate, he returned and took back his position, lesser to forbid it. Look, it's a play on words from the verse. Yeah, it's a play on the psukim. It's not uncommon that they throw in like a little pasuk, but it means to say he turned towards the righteous and said it's forbidden.
I heard clearly that he took back what he said.
This is the source. This idea that the Ben Ish Chai took back his.
I never heard because he understood how the bike works.
This is the source.
He changed his mind.
Yeah, this is the source. The source that the Ben Ish Chai changed his mind to forbid bikes later in life comes from the Yaskal Avdi. As you can see, it doesn't tell us who's the one that relayed this to him. I don't remember who it was. I'm pretty sure I heard it, but this is what they said. Okay. Now comes Rabbi Vadia Yosef in the next responsa, who himself, by the way, also forbids bikes, the usage of bike on Shabbos as well, but nonetheless is reluctant to believe the Yaskal Avdi in his relaying of the fact that someone said in Baghdad that the Ben Ish Chai changed his mind. So let's see.
What did you say? What was the last thing you just
He doesn't believe the rumor that Ben Ish Chai changed his mind.
No.
So let's see, 3 lines in. First, he quotes the Yaskel Avdi, and then he writes.
I really couldn't go against it.
Say again?
You know, there's something with Gemara also that I don't know if it's a buyer. They made a thing and he didn't like this, and you're not supposed to. There's a few cases.
Keep it
with
enough,
Gemara like
yeah.
that. And so that's what I heard. The thing, all of them posket one way, he's only one the other way. So it didn't stay good. So
let's see what Rabbi Yosef writes. So 3 lines down after the parentheses there, he quotes first what we just read, that the Yaskel Avdi writes that I heard from people that he changed his mind. Yeah, on the bottom of page 2, the last paragraph from page 2.
Ani Yomer?
Ani Yomer, yes, I say, says Rabbi Avad Yosef. She'ein laham lishmasei. Don't believe this rumor. The Kvar Shalu es Rabbani Bavel has Canaan. I've already asked of the elders of Babylonia, meaning Iraq, She'olam Bavel Eretz HaKadosh, who moved from Babylonia, from Iraq to Israel. He himself, by the way, also lived in Baghdad and moved to Israel, as I wrote there in the little parentheses at the top. And I asked them, is it true, this rumor, that the Ben Ish Chai changed his mind? And all the elders I spoke to responded, they never heard of such a thing, that the Ben Ish Chai changed his mind. Moreover, how did they do what everybody knows? The rabbi's pen was prolific to write plenty. And if he were to change his mind, he would write that in one of his other works that were published and written after the book, where he wrote his permissibility. Go and look. Harav I think it should say Yud. Like go look at what he writes in a book called Yidei Chaim, Lahamid Dvarov, or maybe this is someone else speaking. That Lahamid Dvarov, to substantiate his words, Shemutil Soyal of Naim Shabbos, is permissible to drive a bike on Shabbos. Shafilu Nimta Tam Leimer She'ilu Hoya Bizman Chazal, because even of Naim is bikes. And you'll see, look in this source where he just quoted Yidei Chaim, that he writes to substantiate the view that it's permissible to ride a bike on Shabbos. And then he writes, Shafilu Nimta Tam Leimer, even if you're going to find a reason to say, that if the bike existed in times of the Gemara, in times of our sages, they would have forbade it, to use on Shabbos, for some sort of decree. Let's say you were to argue that if the bike was around in the times of the Gemara, they would forbid it. Why? The Shem Yiskalka, we have talked about Shabbos, because the bike might break and it might fix it on Shabbos. And maybe you'll successfully argue to me that if the bike were around in the times of the Gemara, they would forbid it. Forbade it. In cause, nonetheless, just because our sages at that time had the power to forbid that which is permissible in decree, as a decree, we don't have now the obligation to go and extend that decree to something new. We do not have the ability to forbid that which is permissible based on some decrees.
This is the Ben Ish Chai thing.
This is Rabbi Avad Yosef defending the Ben Ish Chai. The Yaskel Avdi writes.
So that's his main reason.
Exactly my point.
So why is he giving?
One second. The Yaskel Avdi writes that I heard a rumor the Ben Ish Chai changed his mind. Avad Yosef says never happened. Don't believe it. Because the whole argument of the Ben Ish Chai is not based on whether it's on knowing how it works or not knowing how it works. It's based on the fact that we don't have the right to introduce new gzedas. So you're going to tell me that we should make a gzeda to forbid it because it might break and you're going to fix it. The Ben Ish Chai's argument is built on the fact that we don't get to make gzedas. We don't get to make decrees. And if you don't tell me that he changed his mind, it goes against the grain of his whole argument. If he said it's forbidden, if he says it's permissible because this is not an issue, that's not an issue, and then you returned and said it is an issue, maybe you can say he changed his mind once he discovered how bikes works. But since the whole crux of his argument is that I know about all your issues and I still don't care because we don't make gzedas, we don't make decrees, then the fact that he found out how bikes work later doesn't help. He would still stand by his, we don't make new decrees. So this is all Rabbi Avad Yosef.
But he doesn't agree with it.
No, he himself rules that it's forbidden, as we're going to see soon, because the previous generation majority forbid it, and that's why he forbids it.
Oh, so he's just saying that he doesn't.
But he's saying, don't say that the Ben Ish Chai changed his mind. Never happened. Okay, but then you see also from the way Rabbi Avad Yosef quotes the Ben Ish Chai, and this is kind of where I got this idea that the main issue of the Ben Ish Chai is not so much whether it is or isn't, but because we don't make new decrees. Whereas all the others who say it's forbidden, they're saying, we understand that this is a bad idea for Shabbos, so we're going to say it's not good. And we'll find reasons why it's not good. But Ba'atzim, it's wrong for Shabbos.
Right.
And let's see. Okay, so now that we established if there's a minority that says it's permissible, let's look at those who say that it is forbidden. Now, right here, ha'osim, those who forbid, top page, 3. Roiv ha'machriya. The defining majority is on the side that it is forbidden to ride a bike on Shabbos. And let's go through some of the arguments that they made throughout the history, specifically those at the beginning, the first generation. So we have here Rabbi Dr. Azriel Hildesheimer, 1820, 1899, Berlin. He's on the, we would say, modern Orthodox side of things, right? He's a rabbi, he's a doctor, lives in Berlin in those years. He's not, of course, he's not, God forbid, part of the Enlightenment, but certainly from the early proponents of what was called then Torah v'derech Eretz, which meant Torah along with the way of the world, which is like a precursor to the modern Orthodoxy that we know today in America. This is the precursor to that is Rabbi Shlomo Hirsch in Germany and others of that thought, including Azriel Hildesheimer. I'm saying this because even he forbids it. Even he forbids it, even though he's supposedly modern Orthodox. Okay, so he writes question. Aleph is the person questioning, and the Aleph is the second Aleph, and the second picture is his response. So the question is, it's been a couple of years. They invented this mechanism, to ride on it, balisos, without any horse, any other force. Only by the weight, the kvedos, and the heaviness of the person who sits on it. This machine goes on its way. In a class, and it's called Pilutzi Pete. So we call it Jarad somewhere, and now it's I don't know, it's got to be in Germany. How would you say bicycle in Germany? I don't know. Anyway, its wheels are covered in gumi is rubber. Is it permissible to ride this bike inside the city limits? So you see, he doesn't raise the issue of Eidov. He just says, because he anyways forbids it, so it doesn't make a difference if it's Eidov or not Eidov, he forbids it, period. But he does raise a point, which is even if you say it's permitted, well, the Ben Ish Chai already said you have to be in an Eidov. But in theory, there's another issue, which we're going to see comes up soon, is the city limits, right? On Shabbos, a person is not allowed to leave outside the certain city limits, which is 2,000 cubits beyond the city. Even if you're walking, one cannot walk past that point. So this person is asking if he can ride this bike within those city limits. And the person asks, what should we be concerned about? Are we worried about someone breaking off a branch? The reason why he says that is because, get this, why is it forbidden to ride a horse on Shabbos? What? Because you might break off a branch to hit the horse to go faster. See, there's an example of the sages understanding that riding a bike is not an appropriate thing on Shabbos. And they said the reason is, and they found the reason, which is might break off a branch. How common is it that riding horses break off a branch?
What? You don't need it for a bike.
It depends where you're going.
Sorry?
Where you are.
Whatever. My point is that these things are, if you remember that these things, the reasons sometimes come after the thing. Yeah. Sometimes the reason comes first, and as a result of a reason, they come up with a gzeda, they come up with a decree. Oftentimes it's the reverse. They understand this decree is proper, and then they give reasons after. And I would venture to argue that that's the case with riding horses on Shabbos, and the same thing with the bike here. But anyway, the questioner is saying, what should we be concerned about? Breaking off a branch? You don't need a branch to ride your bike. It's not like a horse, you need a branch to hit the horse to go faster. But the questioner says, but if you're worried about making a ditch in the ground, right? One's not allowed to plow the field on Shabbos, and there's a prohibition in the Gemara to drag heavy items on the ground because it's going to make a furrow. That's the right word, a furrow in the ground. So maybe there's a problem with riding a bike because you're making a furrow in the mud. This too is not an issue, says the questioner. And it would seem that the reason why it's not an issue is because we already have, even in Berlin in the 1800s, we already have cobblestone streets. Who's making furrows by walking around or driving their bike on the streets? Nobody. So what's the issue with driving a bike on Shabbos? Asked the questioner.
Yeah, but you have to say that it's
Hang on a
darker on cement,
Is
not
that,
on
is that for us
cobblestone,
also,
not
like
on.
walking on grass, we do the same thing?
No, so that's permissible because of psik ratio. It's something you're not interested in
not
the
really
grass being
doing
ripped on Shabbos. You're not doing it because you want
Intentionally.
that. You're just walking, and it so happens that this is happening. In fact, if we're up to you, you would prefer that it didn't rip, right?
Right. It's the same thing as taking a bench and ripping it. You're not
Oh,
doing
but if
anything.
it's so, but if it's something which is, so that's the difference between a light bench and a heavy bench. A light bench, which may not necessarily make a furrow, and it does. Okay, it made a furrow, you don't care. But if it's a heavy bench and it's inevitable, there's no other option but for it to make a furrow, it becomes forbidden. When you walk, it's not a definite that this grass going to rip, right? So the questioner is saying with the bike, for sure there's going to be a furrow, and that's really an issue. I don't think so. We're riding on cobblestone. So what does the guy respond? What does the guy, Rabbi Hildesheimer, respond? Why are you so quick to dismiss the issue of making a furrow with the bike? No, that's a good reason to forbid it. Making a furrow as he drives his bike on ground that is not paved is a real problem. And even if we're going to permit it, that you can ride your bike on a ground that is paved, it can easily go off the road to a paved, to that which is not paved. So tell me if this, you tell me which one comes first, the arrow or the circle. It's clear, right? But he's right though. He's still right. He's still right. He's still right. It's something about it didn't sit right with him. What are you talking about? You're so easily to dismiss the issue of making a furrow. You know, I don't want to say this, but he didn't even like come up with a thought that wasn't the questioner's thought. He just took the questioner's suspicion and said, yeah, that's there. And even if there are streets paved, maybe he's going to go off to a street that's not paved. And because of that, how can we permit it? As if to say, to begin with, it shouldn't be permitted. And you want to say we're permitting it because this is not an issue. How can we permit such a thing? When perhaps he might end up on a not paved road. I don't know how common not paved roads were in Berlin at the time, but to the point that he's worried about making a furrow on a bike, but the point still stands. Okay, so this is Rabbi Hildesheimer. Our next source to forbid the bike is the famous Kaf HaChaim.
Okay, but let's say according to him, let's say nowadays it would be it'll only be cement.
Yeah, nowadays it's all cemented, so the issue is gone, right? I mean, that's not. You might end up driving your bike into Hampstead Park and drive on the grass. That would be like the argument. I don't know how common was mud roads in Berlin in the 1800s.
Yeah, I'm sure there were side roads.
I'm sure there were side roads like that, but you think so?
When there was a war, you was pass through the forest all over.
Berlin wasn't the forest. Berlin was a massive city.
City itself.
Or maybe he's saying, like the world over, I can't permit it because in the shtetls, they're going to be driving on the mud. Maybe. But he doesn't say that. He says, if we allow him to drive on the paved road, he might easily turn off the paved road to a not paved road. So maybe there were not paved roads around Berlin commonly. Maybe. Anyway. That's my point. Okay. My point. Okay, let's see. So this is issue number 1. Issue number 2, the Kaf HaChaim. So he first, I'm not going to read through the whole thing because I don't want to.
Which one? Top of the page?
Page 3. Although I have to reach the bottom of page 3. It says Kaf HaChaim Oir HaChaim Siman Tov Daled Ois Ches.
Oh, it's Rabbi New Jr.
No, where are you?
Yes, it's Rabbi New.
Yeah.
Yeah.
His brother.
Oh.
So he describes the bike. I'm not going to read through the whole description, but he describes the bike in detail, actually quite in good detail. He talks about the leather, and the leather is filled with air, and the leather goes around he's talking about the wheel. The wheel's got metal, and then around the metal there's a leather, and then you put air, and then there's rubber. He describes the bike in quite detailed, and then he quotes the Ben Ish Chai, which is permissive on the bike.
Where's leather?
Sorry?
Are you doing this now at the bottom?
Say again?
What are you doing?
Yeah. So he describes the bike. Okay, let's read it.
Leather? Where do they have leather?
He describes leather here. Maybe means like the rubber skin.
Rubber is.
No, there's as in
You used to have tubes in those days and then.
Yeah, the tubes where you fill the tubes up with air. And if I did barza, you fill it up, whatever. Okay. So you see here, actually, he says here, if you go to, you can see a beautiful picture of him there.
Next page.
Yeah, the next page.
Right.
And then he writes there, make sure not to pump it on Shabbos. That's a problem. And then in a city that had so that this is permitted in the city. He's quoting still from the Ben Ish Chai that it's permitted in the city with an Eruv. Baram, however, in a city that doesn't have an Eruv, in Carmelis, and the streets are an area called a Carmelis, which is not exactly a public domain, but we treat it like a public domain. Like Shom Aser, where carrying there is forbidden. In Lahater, one should not permit it. Only for someone who people need him. The lab dafka, not only the shmoya chachmasai, you have to go listen to the shir, or the fakech al isker abim, or to go deal with some communal issue. Allahua didn't the same thing is true in Moshiach Tzibur if he's a chazan, or likras parsha, he's the balkaid, he's got to read the Torah. The angel also yadir likras, no one else knows how to read the Torah like him. Or the dvar mitzvah, or he's got to go for some mitzvah. They're going to shahadach lebes knesses, he's going to shul, the shmoya kaddish kedusha to hear kaddish kedusha. Baderach rakoik. And the distance is far between his house and shul. He's old and weak, like the V'achar or some other reason. Right? So therefore, he's saying that even in a case where you could ride a bike, according to the Ben Ish Chai, he could ride a bike. But then he goes on to say that if there's an actual Rosh Hashanah, then you shouldn't. This is all him paraphrasing the Ben Ish Chai. Now, go after the two dots there where it says Yoyin Shem, there's two dots and it says Amnam. Amnam, however.
How far down?
The
big lines and it's still the small ones.
It's the last line parallel to the picture. Amnam yesh ksas.
Yeah, I got it.
Amnam yesh ksas machranim. There are some of the latter rabbis. Shadaitam lahachmer. Their opinion is to be stringent and not allow bikes. Why? Get this. Listen to this. And you tell me which one comes first, the circles or the darts. Because most of the people who drive bikes, Haneskarim mentioned above, these bikes we talked about, they aren't Orthodox people. If we allow them to drive their bikes in the city, they're going to drive their bikes right outside the city. And they're going to easily go outside the city limits. Because in one moment with this new technology called the bike, a person can go many, many cubits. So in other words, he's saying is like this. If we tell people, yeah, bikes are not a problem on Shabbos, we're going to have people in Hampstead taking their bikes up to the country. And we can see that happening. It's not so far-fetched, right? If we say bikes are okay, start explaining to people that bikes are okay, but only if you stay in the city limits, people are going to take their bikes and drive to the country on Shabbos and say, oh, I didn't do anything wrong. I took my bike. It's not electric. That's what people are going to say. And therefore, how could we allow bikes? The Gam additionally, we have the concern, maybe the leather, he says leather, but maybe he means like the rubber, will get a hole. The derech on his travels, the yavel talking about and he's gonna have to fix it with new leather, with new rubber, or with devek and with like glue, as is his custom to on weekday. Mana, and this is a biblical prohibition of fixing something.
What's mana?
You're talking money means like mitaken kli. You're fixing up it's an Aramaic term. And sometimes he's going to be going uphill and he won't be able to pedal the bike up there. He's going to have to carry it in his hand. And this would be considered carrying 4 cubits in public domain, or the not actual public domain, but what we consider a public domain. And this is indeed the custom here in the land of Israel. People do not drive bikes mentioned above, like a Shabbos, not a Shabbos, like a Yom Tov, not a Shabbos, not a Yom Tov. Even a city that has an Eruv. So he gives 2 reasons. Number one, because the non-religious people are going to take the permissibility of bike and drive out of the city. It's A. B, it might, actually 3 reasons. B, it might pop and you'll have to fix it. And number 3, if you're going uphill, you're going to end up carrying your bike.
What's their tzvi means?
And it's the Gemara and the Nach refers to Eretz Yisrael as Eretz Tzvi. Gemara discusses why it's called Eretz Tzvi. If I remember correctly,
What is
because a tzvi is a deer.
there?
Because a deer, when you if you skin a deer and you try to put the flesh back into the skin, it doesn't work. And so likewise, Eretz Yisrael, you can it stretches as the Jews get in there. You don't imagine how we can all fit in there, but we all somehow fit in there. So if I remember correctly, it's one of the reasons the Gemara says it's compared to a deer. Anyway, so you see here, he gives these 3 reasons. What was it, right? He's worried about people leaving the tchum. It's going to pop. People are going to carry it.
That's it.
Yeah, those are those 3 reasons.
Nothing about making the road.
No, but you can see he tags on all these issues
They don't
again
do- they don't
because
want it us,
at the core he thinks it's not right, and this is the custom here in Israel. People don't do this on Shabbos because it's not a.
Shabbos.
Similarly, this is so we had so far from the Kaf HaChaim speaking in Israel. We had Rabbi Hildesheimer speaking in Berlin, and now we go to Yugoslavia. Yugoslavia is the Shaalos Yaakov, written by Rabbi Shlomo Baruch Prager, known as Shlomo Yaakov Segal. Right, his name was Yaakov Segal. How do you sign his name? Yaakov Segal. Yeah. Should say Yaakov Shlomo Baruch, I think. Maybe I got this wrong. Anyways, known as Yaakov Segal. It's Yaakov ben Mordechai. I don't know why it says there Shlomo Baruch. Sorry. So maybe this is also the wrong dates. 1887, 1943 could be the wrong dates also. And Yugoslavia could be the wrong place. Sorry, I looked at the wrong person. Anyway, written by Yaakov Segal. You know what? Since we're here, give me a second. We'll look it up. Who's Yaakov Segal? Yaakov Prager. Try getting like an array from different places and regions, but I got it wrong. Okay. Bnei Brak. No, that doesn't make sense. Okay, I don't know.
The world is amazed from you that just once a week, 24 hours, you don't touch the phone because that's what Shabbos is. Imagine Shabbos everyone has it.
1901. More. So where do you live? Student of Bernard Chicken is rabbi of the Ada community. Yeah, the Ada community. Anybody know where Ada is? Ada, anybody? City? Looking it up. Not Ada, Oklahoma. No, not what we're looking for. Anyway, okay. So he writes like this. He goes on to raise different reasons why it should be permitted to ride the bike and why it shouldn't be permitted to ride the bike. I'm just collecting the little snippets of where he says why it should be forbidden. I don't go through the whole pilpul, just the snippets of why he says it's forbidden. Reason number 1, it seems to me lesser. Another good reason to say it's forbidden to ride the bike on Shabbos. Our teacher in the book called Chasam Sofer, gives a citation. Says it's forbidden to go on a Eisenbahn. This really means an iron wagon. I think he means like a push, maybe he means like a push cart of some sort. Not sure what that is, but I think that's what it is. Yeah, but why? This is the main point. Because shutircha, because alpi divrei Ramban, based on the words of the Ramban, Parshas Emor, in his commentary to the Chumash in Emor, tebachal davar shutircha, anything that requires exertion, also b'Shabbos is forbidden on Shabbos. Afilu enim alamatas malachas, even if it's not one of the 39 forbidden works. Why? Tehu b'chlal tishboisim. It's part of the commandment, thou shalt rest. The same thing, same thing implied by the Rambam. Now we're skipping a few lines and went to the next box. So therefore it seems to me, we can say how much the more so. In Maram Chasam Sofer, King Kasaf, if our teacher, the Chasam Sofer, writes about Alanasiya Ba'Eisenbahn in the next picture.
Oh, on top
there. Yeah. The next image of the text. If he writes about going in an Eisenbahn, because sometimes it shakes. Yeah, maybe Eisenbahn actually means just to train. Yeah, is that what an Eisenbahn is?
Going on a regular train, you said you're allowed to.
No, he's talking about why the Chasam Sofer says it's not, you're not allowed to go on an Eisenbahn because it takes too much effort, and therefore, how much more so you can't go on a bike if it has so much effort. That's basically what he's arguing. Rising.
Sitting on the train.
Is it the effort that the train has to make?
Yeah, railway, a
Maybe-
train. Why?
or maybe
Why is it
it's-
effort? Because sometimes the train shakes. And mikri tircha, that's considered exertion. Kolsaking bezeh, how much more so on this? Shekol rechivasa al pi gufay, ite gufa v'chnoisa. The entire movement of the bike happens through his body and his work. Pshita the asa lafi divrei Ramban. Certainly, it's forbidden according to the words of Ramban. Hashem ufrashim mamish. I'm not sure what that last word is. As that's literally as it's clear in the verse of Nehemiah where it says to rest. I think that's what he's talking about. I'm not sure if that's the right word. But the bottom line is that Ramban says it's forbidden to do anything that takes exertion, and bike takes exertion.
And playing basketball.
Playing basketball, he said it's permissible.
So you know,
Yeah.
it's the same idea. You
Another question. Another question for another time. Okay. Besides for this, this would be a mundane weekday activity, not a Shabbos activity. And it's not uncommon that people take bikes from one city to the next. And people will suspect you that you traveled from outside of the city limits, which is forbidden. And you went for your business, etc., as the Gemara says, forbidding certain activities because of the way people perceive it. Okay, so that's reason number 2. Reason number 1 is too much exertion. Reason number 2 is because people are going to suspect you of going from one place to another for business, and therefore it's considered a mundane activity. So you want to know why it's mundane activity? Because travel is a mundane activity, and bike is a travel thing. People travel far and wide with bikes. Now he says as follows, and here again gets back to my main point, which is which one comes first, the dart or the circles? Listen to these words. We've never seen such a thing of someone driving a bike on Shabbos. Only the kinds of people who, to begin with, take the whole Judaism lightly. And how could one rabbi come and permit this? This is a matter of great curiosity, and it should not be instructed that you allow biking on Shabbos. As the Gemara says in Psachim, I didn't look it up. The Chassam Sofer says, and I mentioned this earlier, Chadash Asim and Atayra. The Chassam Sofer coined this term, the word Chadash Asim and Atayra. Those words, it's a play on words. What it comes from is there's a prohibition to eat of grain that has been produced prior to the giving of the Omer, which is in the second day of Pesach. So that's called new grain. It's new grain. It's grain it's grain that exists that the day for second day Pesach hasn't passed by. So it's new.
Yeah, till you bring the carbon.
Until or today's till after the time when the carbon is till after the second day Pesach. So Chadash, new grain, is awesome and Atayra, is forbidden biblically speaking until the offering is brought. The Chassam Sofer used this term to describe all new attitudes of enlightenment and unorthodox. Chadash Asma Torah, all these new attitudes forbidden. And Rabbi Prager Segal, is taking this term and using it here too. This new attitude, we're biking around on Shabbos. What kind of thing is this? Only those who take Judaism lightly would do such a thing. It's impossible to believe that a rabbi who is responsible for instructing Torah law, that has the fear of heaven, may be blessed. I'm not sure what this next word is. Something lahatik is I can't believe that someone would permit something like this. I can't believe that. But what's the next word after Yisbar Shemai?
Oh yeah. Oh.
Yahin. Lahatik is we should not permit something like this. And someone who permits this, Hashem Yisbarach Yazarei b'tshuva. God should grant them they should do teshuvah. Sheitakin is there to fix this. So again, you can see which one. Where's it coming from? Chodesh Asman Torah. This new attitude of biking around on Shabbos. What kind of Shabbos is this going to be if everybody's biking around? And he found reasons. So we have a whole conglomerate of reasons. People are going to suspect you traveling out of the Tchum. People might actually end up leaving the Tchum. Might get a flat. Might end up carrying it. Yeah, it's too much exertion.
It makes no sense.
What was the other one? We missed another one.
Make a curve in the floor.
A furrow on the ground. A whole bunch of reasons. Yeah. Now let's get to one final reason. And this is, okay, I don't know how much time we're going to go through the whole thing, but we'll make the main points. So the first text we're looking at is from, not directly talking about bikes, but talking about playing ball on Shabbos, since you asked. And this comes from the Ktseis HaShulchan. And I figured we'd go down this route because the Ktseis HaShulchan was Lubavitcher. As you can see in the parentheses, the famous Rav Avram Chaim Noah, 1890 to 1954, Lubavitcher Rav in Hebron, the holy city. This is Chaim Noah. He wrote many, many volumes of Jewish law, and I don't understand why it hasn't been reprinted properly in a clear format. I don't even know if it's available in the stores, but it's a very thorough and wide-ranging halachic work. It's relevant and is built on the Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch, based on the Chabad custom and so on. So I don't know why it's not more. I mean, it's widely learned in terms of like, a Lubavitcher Rebbe wants to make a ruling, we'll consult with this, but I don't know why it's not like more widely published. But anyway, so he writes, "Aser lischak bekader, it is forbidden to play with a ball, fisha asla talpulei, because it's muktzah. It's muktzah. Muktzah is essentially, well, why is it muktzah? Because it doesn't constitute as a vessel. The rules of muktzah are, without getting too deep down, is basic as follows. The principle of muktzah is you don't touch that which you don't need. So how do you classify what you need and what you don't need? So a stick, mud, you definitely don't need on Shabbos. There's no use for it on Shabbos. Cups, have use for them. Right? So there's all kinds of classifications. Is this a vessel that's meant for, a utensil meant for something that's permitted? Cup. Is this a utensil that's meant for something that's forbidden? A match. Is this a utensil that's meant for both? Certain kinds of knives, which are meant for dishes and also meant for other things. And each type of vessel has different classification as to whether it's muktzah or not, and what level of muktzah it is. Can I use it can I move it if I need a space? Can I move it if I need it itself? Can I move it to protect it from the rain? All kinds of classifications. Says the Ktseis HaShulchan, Reb Chaim Noah, that a ball doesn't constitute being a vessel at all. It's not a vessel, and that's forbidden because it's muktzah. Right? But there are those who permit the usage of it to play with it. It's already been established that people are lenient about this, and no one stopped them. This is what he writes in Halach.
Does he hold that or doesn't?
Let's see. So now he writes. The main book of his work is called Ktseis HaShulchan, where he writes almost like a code of Jewish law, like point halacha. And then he has something called, in his footnotes, his footnotes are called Badei HaShulchan. And in the footnotes, he gives extensive background to substantiate each law. And the background he's going to give, he gives certain background, and the background that's necessary for our discussion is built on the next passage from the Gemara, which I quoted here. And then you can see a beautiful picture of Rabbi Chaim Noah. So the Gemara in Yerushalmi reads as follows. Mount Simon, certain place, was producing 200 barrels of fig pieces every Friday. And they were giving it to the poor. So why was it destroyed? It was such a lofty, beautiful mountain, providing the poor with all kinds of stuff. Some say because of whoring, just promiscuity. But some say because they were playing ball. What's the problem with playing ball? If it's permitted. Why would God punish them for playing ball? So says Rabbi Chaim Noah in his Badei HaShulchan, in his footnotes to Halachos. Let's go through it quickly because his language, I'm going to translate directly, but I quoted the whole thing because it's so rich.
You're starting from the middle of the line.
Yeah. He goes through a whole back and forth about there are certain balls in the times of the Gemara that girls apparently used to play with. They used to bang it and punch it, and he goes through whether it's permitted or not permitted and what kind of. No. Now, after all that, he writes, Beis Yosef, maybe Yerushalmi, the Beis Yosef, Rabbi Yosef Karo, in his commentary quotes the Yerushalmi, which you just read, that Tor Shimon, the mountain of Shimon, Lama Charav, why was it destroyed? Yesh some say because of promiscuity. Yesh that some say the reason why it was destroyed because they were playing ball. Similar statement is said in the Medrash. Amar Rav Huna says that the reason why the city was destroyed because they would play ball on Shabbos. So the Yerushalmi doesn't mention the word Shabbos, but the Medrash does. Okay, so now we understand a little bit more of the Gemara. That opinion which says that they were destroyed because of the playing ball, it's because they were playing ball on Shabbos. Now, According, we mentioned in his little halachic snippet that we read, he gave two opinions. One opinion that says forbidden, and one that says permissible. So the ones who say it's permitted to play ball on Shabbos. So why would the city get destroyed if they're doing something that's permissible? So sort of we must say, what's the meaning of the Medrash and the Yerushalmi which says that the city was destroyed because they were playing ball on Shabbos? Because they made the playing ball kfiyas the Shabbos Kodesh. They made it a permanent thing. Every Shabbos, we go to the park and play ball, or we meet up somewhere and play ball. They would waste away the holy day in games. Even those who permit playing with a ball on Shabbos, they only permitted it as like a temporary happenstance action. Because the ball doesn't constitute as muktzah. God forbid to turn this into an established thing, to spend the holy day on playing ball of wasted time. Nothing more disgraceful to the holy Shabbos than making it, this is the time we play. Shabbos and Yom Tov were given to the Jewish people, so that we can study Torah. All days of the week, Jews are busy working, making a living. And therefore, people who are employers, or employers, they can enjoy Shabbos a little bit. Whatever it is, they have to eat, sleep, drink. They really need to learn on Torah a lot. Shabbos, learn a lot of Torah on Shabbos a lot. They must increase in the study of Torah on Shabbos because they don't have the week to learn. Because of the Shabbos Kodesh, and because of this consistent space of Shabbos in this place called Tor Shimon, even though they didn't violate any of the technical commands, that's why their place was destroyed. These ideas and these words go down to the depth. And we should consider how far does the holiness of Shabbos reach? Even those who say it's forbidden to play ball on Shabbos, it's only an issue of muktzah, which is drabanan, which is rabbinic, not to touch something you don't need. And someone who transgress this minor rabbinic issue causes the destruction of this place called Tor Shimon. This place, which would produce 300 baskets of bread for the poor every Erev Shabbos. And he gives a citation to the commentary of the Medrash, which tells us this. The fact that this town gave tons of tzedakah didn't help them. It's also clear they kept Shabbos in every other detail. Because they were the kinds of people who actually kept Shabbos and gave out bread to the poor people for Shabbos. And because of the sin of muktzah, according to those that say that it's muktzah to play on ball on Shabbos, this is why they get destroyed. So it tells you how important the holiness of Shabbos is, and not just to keep the technical laws of Shabbos, but to maintain the holiness of Shabbos. The kol sheken das matidim, how much more so if you're of the view that it's totally permissible to play ball on Shabbos, the playing of a ball on Shabbos. We must say, that why was Tor Shimon destroyed? Because they profaned the holiness of Shabbos. To waste the time of Shabbos in playing ball, even though it's totally permitted according to those opinions. Now, by the way, all of this, I had to put it in, even though it's not negated to our discussion. The next line's important to our discussion, but I think it gives richness to why our sages found to put the dart in the middle and then the circle around it. Preserving the sanctity of Shabbos is just as important as telling people when they're violating or they're not violating. Now gets to what's important for us. The balls that they used to have back in those days. back in the times of Tor Shimon or the Gemara's time. Where the whole ball was a leather enclosure, and was filled with cloth and tzemer is like wool, like feathers or wool, something like that. He gives citation. Sorry?
No air in it.
That's right. In our days, there's a new type of ball. They call it a football. It means a soccer ball. Kaderegel is a soccer ball.
Right.
They play with it by kicking with the feet. It's made of a pocket of something which the Gemara referred to as sham, shekorin gumi, which we now call rubber. And this rubber ball is placed in a capsule of leather, right? Describing a soccer ball. The rubber we fill with air, through a special device, shekorin pumpa, which they call a pump.
Right.
The kaishin is piv, and they close the hole where they pump the air. The air shouldn't come out. The shakish shel and the ball of leather, like the encapsulation of leather, kaishin but it's suish boy. They stitch it together with stitches that they put there. Rabbis, and very often when you're playing, the air goes out, the ball gets deflated. By playing with it a lot, and the fact that it's rolling around. So for us, then you have to open up the hole. Here he says you untie it. It seems like they actually had a knot. And you got to again fill it with air, pump it again. And then again you close up the hole. So in that case, these balls, everybody's going to agree that these kind of balls are forbidden to play with on Shabbos. Because of the issue, perhaps the ball will get deflated. And you will refill it with this air, with the pump. And now there's two prohibitions. Number one, you are perfecting a vessel on Shabbos. It was unusable, or at least not such good use when it's deflated. You filled it up with air, you perfected it, and that's a problem. But number two, because of the knots. They're making a knot that's permanent. And this already is a biblical prohibition. Okay, so the second one is not an issue today because we don't have the knots. But the first issue of deflating a ball and filling it with air, and this way now perfecting the vessel, that's really a problem.
In those days, not because
in those days it wasn't filled with air. So he's saying even if you're going to go with those who say that those balls were permitted, the balls today are forbidden because of the gzeda. He might get deflated and he might fill it up, right? Okay, now he compares it to a different halacha. Now skip to the next line. The etzem. This is unbelievable. Now he's making a social commentary now. The etzem hamischak hazeh. This whole game, never mind Shabbos. Okay, so Shabbos, I told you why it's a problem. First of all, you're making light of Shabbos when you're playing. Number two, nowadays the balls are different and it's forbidden because you might end up refilling it with air when it's deflated. But you should know the essence of this game. This is a goyish minig. It's a non-Jewish thing. Because they like to play at war and be violent essentially. And the light-headed ones learned from our people, learned from them. This is not the way of the Jewish people to be playing violent games. We run around and kick things, not for Jewish people. Okay, so what does that have to do with the bike? So let's see. We have the next text now. A book called Shmir Shabbos Kalachasa, written by Rabbi Neubart, based on the rulings of Rabbi Shlomo Zalman Auerbach. Yeah, he compares it. He has very strong words to talk about people who busy play these games all day.
And playing cards. I mean, it's the same idea. If you're ruining Shabbos.
But here he's talking about playing this game b'chlal. It's a violent game. It's meant for violence, and it's not for you. It's pretty strong.
That was one reason, but the other reason because the Shabbos is holy.
Again, so you can see already where like the reasons come after. The Easter comes first. Okay, but now based on this, okay, let's just do this. So based on this, this is again this book called Shmir Shabbos Kalachasa, written by Rabbi Neubart, and basically the book is halachas of Shabbos based on the rulings of have a safe trip, good Shabbos, based on the rulings of Rabbi Shlomo Zalman Auerbach. So he writes, Tlas Oifen, a tricycle, that their wheels are made of strong rubber. No reason to stop the kid from riding his tricycle in the house on Shabbos. And if there's an Eidov, he can ride his tricycle outside in the Eidov. The same thing is true of other wheels. Korknit, I think I looked this up. This is a scooter, non-electric scooter. Galgaliot, skatim or skates. So the kids can wear them. The kids can drive them if they're made of solid,
Metal or plastic.
solid rubber, or metal or plastic. Yeah. But if there's a bell, best to take that bell off before Shabbos, so that you don't shake the bell around the Shabbos and Yom Tov. Okay, but we should not ride ordinary bicycles. Even if it's made of solid rubber, even if it's made for children. Now we look in the footnote, Nun Vav, where there he says, look up the Ktseis HaShulchan. So we see that Rabbi Neubart and Rabbi Erbach are using the logic of the Ktseis HaShulchan about the issue of the ball getting deflated and getting re-inflated. They use that as a reason to forbid riding bikes. So I have another one. Even if it's not going to go flat and you're going to have to fix it, you have the issue of the bike deflating and re-inflating. Now our final text, and this really is the attitude of most of the modern halachic rulers. And we're reading here from Yalkut Yosef, the last text there, written by Rabbi Yitzchak Yosef, the son of Rabbi Yosef. And he does a similar thing to what the Ktseis HaShulchan did, which is he has halachas in the top and then the footnotes in the bottom with background to how he came to his conclusion. Now, as I mentioned, I used this footnote for most of the response here because he lists mamish every single source. If I went through every single source, it would take how long. And he quotes the Rabbi Hildesheimer about making the furrows in the ground. He quotes the Kaf HaChaim about the bike maybe breaking down or about people going outside the tchum. And he goes through each of the reasons, and really he says that each of the reasons are not so good. He explains why you can get around all the issues. Why it's not a problem today. Today we're not worried about bikes breaking down or the furrows don't exist anymore, especially with, it's not an issue, whatever. All goes through all of them, explains why it's not an issue. But, he says, considering the majority of the last generation, their opinion is to be stringent, but Shabbos become a time. They have a bunch of reasons to say why it's forbidden to drive a bike on Shabbos. Therefore, this is the way we should rule. The royal achim is that's appropriate to be stringent. As the Shaalos Yaakov, which we read earlier, says it's forbidden because it's a mundane activity. And he gives other reasons. Ayin Sham, go look over there. Go on. I'm skipping a few sections, and at the end, after the parentheses, and therefore it's appropriate to tell the people to be stringent, to follow the majority of the last generation. And then again,
so he doesn't like his father.
No, his father agrees. I didn't quote his father, but his father agrees also it's forbidden. I didn't find the source where his father said it's forbidden. I only quoted his father, which said that you shouldn't think that the Ben Ish Chai changed his mind. But Rabbi Yosef also agrees that it's forbidden.
Well, this is how Rabbi Vaj's son.
Rabbi Vaj's son. No, this is the Rabbi Yosef's son. Then he says, nowadays we don't have an issue. Maybe the bike can break down. It's not really something that you're building. Nonetheless, because the custom is we are stringent and lahakil, one should not be permissive.
It may break.
Nowadays, we're not so worried the bike's going to break. How often the bikes break down to fix it? They're made very well. It breaks down not very often. And even he's not convinced that fixing the bike would be a problem of building on Shabbos. But nonetheless, because the custom has become that we are stringent not to ride bikes on Shabbos, one should not be lenient. Look up the book and the footnotes there. That as far as the letter of the law goes, one can ride on pedal bikes. But it's forbidden because the custom has become more forbidden. See, this is the point. Once Torah, through the sages and through practice, comes to the conclusion something is forbidden, you can come from today till tomorrow and explain why all the reasons why it's forbidden don't exist anymore. It doesn't matter. Once Torah, in the way Torah works, with the Siyat D'Shmaya, with the divine intervention and intuition of the Chachamim, come to the conclusion that something's forbidden, and it's been practiced that way to be forbidden, one does not have the right to say it's permitted. Even if you find all the explanations for why it should be permissible. It's like the kinds of things which are technically permitted, but because people decide it's forbidden, and its practice is forbidden, it remains forbidden. You have no right to permit it. So, which is interesting. Whereas the Ben Ish Chai said, we have no reason to say to make new gzedas, to make new decrees and forbid it. A generation later, where everybody's accepted that it's forbidden, now the logic applies the reverse. Who's going to take it upon their shoulders to say that now it's permissible for everybody after 150, 200 years of Jews not doing it because they found these reasons to say it's forbidden? So you're going to be the one to be smarter than the last 200 years of Jewish practice and say it's permissible? That's not the way Torah works. Torah works where it goes forward. Conclusions are made that something is forbidden, it becomes forbidden by Torah law. And as I said before, this is really cuts to the heart of understanding the halachic process. Once our Chachamim, with the Siyat D'Shmaya, with the divine intervention and intuition of the Torah, come to a conclusion that something is forbidden, even if all the reasons are tenuous. And we could see clearly that not all the reasons are so strong. And we could see clearly that they're putting the arrow in the center, that it's forbidden, and then finding reasons. But that itself, that they all came to that same conclusion together, with the exception of one, everybody says it's forbidden. And then for generations, Jews are not riding bikes. And this clearly becomes the will of Hashem. And this is the way Torah operates throughout all the centuries. Okay, so this is an overview of the issue of riding a bike on Shabbos. Hope that was clear. Hope that was interesting. I found it interesting to research. Oh, don't say it's forbidden for the other reasons. The main reason why it's forbidden is because everybody says it's forbidden, not because of the reasons because we don't have the right to make new gzedas. But the reality is everybody's already decided that it's forbidden, and because everybody decided it's forbidden, that's why it's forbidden. That's the truth is it's stronger than any other reason. It's the most strong reason, which is Jews have all come together and say we don't do it. That is the strongest reason to say it's not allowed. So this is a Gavaldik Azach. Okay, so if you have suggestions for next week, let me know, and we'll maybe something related to Purim or whatever. Okay, wonderful evening, Yidden.
Thank you.
Okay, have a good evening, everyone. All right, thank you very much.